Good morning, everyone. I am Neha Patnagar, Vice President Partnerships at IIC. And after serving IIC since its very inception, witnessing this panel was particularly exceptional and nostalgic, with three of our chairpersons coming together from different times. Thank you very much, Geeta, Sandeep, Shilpa, and Sugandhi, for this extraordinary session. Is this better? Yeah. We are also trying to fix the beautiful faces on the screen, so please bear with us. And of course, Royston, our constant guide through the decade, you know how big fans we are, how you smoothly intersect everything with impact. So big thank you to everyone. As Girish earlier mentioned, the process of bringing Prabhav together is extremely close to our hearts. And at the council, I would like to pause and take a moment to thank and give a big shout out to all the IIC members, the team of IIC, Divya, Sonali, Isha, Varun, and Vidhi, the captain of the ship, Mr. Girish Aivali, and finally a very special partner in crime for the last 10 years, Ranjana. This has been quite a ride. Thank you. So on that note, once again, I welcome you all to the 5th edition of our flagship conference, Prabhav 2024. Continuing the lightning and inspirational talks, we now welcome a prominent investor in private equity and venture capital, and a leading advocate for gender diversity in the investment ecosystem. Nupur Garg, founder of Winpe. Nupur, as many of you might know, has had a solid background of being an LP for decades now. Alongside, she's also dedicated to enhancing the representation of women in financial sector. Currently, she's on the investment committee of 3 LPs, through them invested in a number of PEVC funds in India and globally. These LPs include National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, which is NIIF, the Dutch Good Growth Fund, and Government of India's Fund of Fund managed by Sydney. Given Nupur's experience leading IFC's private equity and venture capital in the region, she is a trailblazer in institutional investing and governance. Nupur, what a pleasure to have you speak about the power of LP storytelling amplifying impact. We welcome you, Nupur.
A very good morning to my friends, my colleagues. It is such a pleasure and privilege to be standing here in front of an audience with such wise and... Is this better? So once again, a very warm good morning to all my friends and colleagues here. It is an extraordinary pleasure and privilege for me to stand here in front of this audience, which has such seasoned and wise investors. So thank you IIC and thank you Prabhav for this opportunity. You know, I just met Anil here, Anil Sinha, the person who really truly introduced me to the concept of impact investing, and I actually had planned a little anecdote and I'll come to it later. And then there is Sandeep Faryas, somebody who really taught me how impact investors think about it, and in my view, should be thinking about impact investing. So thank you, Sandeep. So glad to see you here. Anil looks exactly the same as he did. You have a whiter mustache and an even whiter beard than when we last met. But a pleasure, and thank you again. In its 5th edition, Prabhav has become the confluence for ideas and discussions on impact investing. And in the course of your 2 days here, you will undoubtedly gather a lot of data and insights from all the senior speakers that are present. So what I thought I will do is share my own journey with impact investing, how I saw it evolve, and how my own understanding of this investment strategy evolved alongside. So like I said earlier, my first tryst with impact in investing started in 2007 when I was at IFC. As a multilateral DFI, IFC was focused on creating impact. Now, whether it was through creating jobs via investments in manufacturing businesses or expanding availability of financial services and credit through microfinance institutions, private banks and NBFCs, or whether it was supporting the development of infrastructure, impact was rather macro at a market level and with a focus on the economy. So India was an emerging country. It was a developing economy. So impact was really thinking about the country as a whole. And for funds, impact was created by supporting new and emerging fund managers who would help establish a robust private equity and venture capital industry. So really try and catalyze the creation of the asset class in India and then mobilize private investments into the country. Fast forward to 2011, when I was invited by Anil to a discussion on impact investing. And in this discussion, impact was to be created through the kind of businesses you invested in and the stakeholders that those businesses served. So in hindsight, I find it quite interesting to note that this meeting was actually with the team that Anil led, which focused on technical assistance and working with the grassroots businesses. So not really the investing team, but rather the TA team. And the reason I was invited was Anil being Anil. He thought I could add value, but also because the fund manager in the room dared suggest that this could be the sort of fund that an IFC could invest in, and no prizes for guessing who this person was. It was Vineet Rai. But it was an interesting shift in how I thought about investing for impact, for sure. But again, impact investing as a concept was new and there was no standard terminology, and I think it was touched upon in this panel as well. I think the lexicon is still evolving. But at that time, it was very, very nascent and there was really no standard framework. You didn't even know what kind of outcomes or what kind of metrics should be measured. And in the same meeting with Vineet, we deliberated on how impact investments had higher risk and by conventional logic should deliver higher returns, right? Now, could impact be introduced as a third axis to the risk-return equation, so the tripod that the earlier session spoke about? That tripod didn't really exist. And if we introduce impact as a third axis, where should it sit? Within that equilibrium, was impact additional or was it a substitute to returns? A very interesting dichotomy, and for which there really wasn't a clear answer at that time. And I think there isn't a clear answer at this time either. It is something that continuously evolving, but I believe we've made fair progress. But if you think about it, it is reasonable for LPs to ask for returns. There is a difference in charity and investments. And also personally, I believe strongly that true impact has scale and is sustainable. Now here by sustainable, I'm not talking about green. I mean longevity and some sort of a permanence. A bit like instead of giving a fish to someone so that they can eat that day, why can't you give them a fishing rod and teach them how to fish? At a business level, that translates into being able to earn profits. But as we all know, that is not as easy as it sounds. It's almost trying to create a cross between a social enterprise and a commercial enterprise, and again the role of grants, etc. And then when you think about creating a commercial enterprise, there are questions about excluding a segment of the population that may not have the ability to pay, and arguably the segment that could possess the direst need. And as I know from my own work at Winpe, there are some things, some changes, some impact that really cannot be driven if one has to keep an eye on the bottom line. Now, there are some systemic issues and societal imbalances that have built over hundreds of years and that really cannot be fixed in a profitable way. And within that, I think stands one of the biggest issues as I see for impact investment funds, and I think which also faces climate funds as we go forward. The pool of LP capital impact investing is quite diverse in terms of their objectives. So for example, a foundation would like to come in with an impact first or impact only approach. a DFI would come in with an impact plus returns approach. And if you convince a third type of a category to come in, they would rather see high returns, potentially at the cost of creating only moderate impact. And then it becomes the responsibility of a fund manager to respond to these different mandates from their investors while staying true to their stated strategy. That said, I think the impact investing industry has done phenomenally well in educating the world of LPs. Indian fund managers have been at the forefront of this effort, and rightly so. India is probably the largest market which offers the opportunity to create impact with scale and sustainability. So whether you take a sectoral view to impact, like say agri or microfinance, etc., or you think about it in terms of geography or communities to target stakeholders which could be say rural or urban poor or tier 2 or tier 3, Indian fund managers have been able to showcase the ability to both identify and grow scalable and successful models. And there is, there is this learning that I got from Sandeep early on about the need and importance to focus on scale and unit economics from day one. As per an IIC report, about $2.9 billion was invested in 2023 across 275 business enterprises. Now that is substantial, but also as a percentage of the overall activity in the private equity and venture capital industry, it is still small. The aggregate activity stood at 49.8 billion. So in some part, I think it is a function of branding, again something that the panel earlier touched upon. Impact funds are using technology, but tech funds are being labeled VC, it's sort of created a separate category, a separate investment strategy. And I think also, in some part, it is a function of how we define impact. Now, can we consider e-commerce models that create access to goods and services as impact? Why not? Can we consider responsible ways of managing satellite traffic in space as impact? Why not? Right? So, impact investing, I think, has a technical definition, but I believe what it means in practice should always remain fluid, because impact is contextual, it is relative, and it is about emotions. And on the emotions, let me share an example. Now, if you can just sort of close your eye and think of an investment that gave a housing loan to a widowed mother of 3 in rural Tamil Nadu, so that the family could finally put a roof on top of the 4 walls within which they lived. This is a real life example. It makes you feel really good. Think about investing in a 500-bed hospital that brings state-of-art equipment. And we all know the shortage of beds in India. But this is not as fuzzy as the first one, right? And to a certain extent, one could also think it's a bit capitalist. So, or even if you think of a housing finance company, say in an urban setting, it services the urban areas as against rural areas. Regardless of what the loan profile would be, it still feels as if the impact is not as strong as the first example. Why? It is not up to us to judge whether the needs of the urban population is less important than the needs of the rural population. Human needs are human needs. One could say urban populations are richer, but not necessarily true. There are enough urban poor in this country and cost of living is higher, etc., etc. But whether it is the savior complex in us or the innate need to feel good about doing good, there are some stories of impact that appeal more strongly than others. And that, I think, is a critical aspect. Storytelling is an absolute must if you are an impact investor. So for many LPs, decision makers are quite far from the market and they're quite removed from the ground realities. Ground realities may not be as visible to them. I remember sitting through this session in the US. I was in business school and we had a session with Ms. Novogratz, the founder of Acumen. right? And she was walking around the room, and she was, if I can say so, she was dressed top to bottom in high-end brands. And she's talking about a story in Africa about a village where there are flying toilets, which meant that they didn't have any washrooms in the village, and everybody sort of just used a newspaper, put it in a polythene bag, bound it up, and flung it out of the window, right? And you know, talking about walking through the streets of that village, which has flying toilets. It felt a little strange. It felt a little artificial. But if you look at how capital flows, I think that is how it is. A lot of the capital is flowing in from developed markets, from markets which have not really experienced the challenges that we are doing here. And it becomes so important to communicate that reality and the changes that one's investments are driving. I have seen fund managers given to the need to share data and graphs and tables. And I say, just add a picture of that woman and her 3 kids inside their 4 walls and new roof. Thank you.
Hello. Nupur, thank you very much. I can strongly vouch for all of us that we go back inspired. Thank you. Thank you very much.